Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep on something familiar to most folks, Santa Claus. But I bet we're about to uncover some stuff you never knew about good old Saint Nick.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to go way beyond the whole milk and cookies, presents under the tree image.
Right.
We're talking how Santa went from a real historical dude to, well, a global icon.
Yeah.
And, we'll get into some of the controversies that come with that.
Ooh, can't wait for that. So we've got research here covering everything from Santa's origins all the way to his modern-day critics. Should be interesting.
Definitely. But before we get too far down the chimney, let's establish something. That image of Santa in your head, the jolly guy, red suit, the whole 9 yards, well, that's not universal.
Oh, that's a good point. I'm already curious about those different versions. But first, let's rewind. Let's start at the very beginning. We're talking the historical figure behind the myth, St. Nicholas. He was a 4th century bishop, right?
That's the one. And he wasn't just handing out presents to every well-behaved kid.
Right.
St. Nicholas was known for his generosity, especially to the poor and those in need.
So is that where the Santa Claus we all know comes from, like these quiet acts of charity?
You could say that. You know that story about St. Nicholas giving dowries to those 3 poor sisters so they wouldn't be forced into, let's just say, undesirable situations?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Well, that's a perfect example. These acts of secret giving, they're a key part of the legacy.
That's fascinating. So how did a 4th century bishop become, well, Santa Claus? I mean, Europe to global icon is a big jump.
Yeah, it's a wild ride. Centuries of cultures mixing, merging different traditions, folklore, the whole shebang. And get this, it even includes a bit of grave robbing.
Hold on, grave robbing. Now, that's not something you hear every day. Tell me more.
Okay, so picture this. It's the 11th century. These Italian merchants decide to, shall we say, borrow St. Nicholas's remains from his tomb in Turkey.
They stole a saint's bones.
They thought they were rescuing relics, And to this day, those bones are split between 2 churches in Italy.
Wow, that's a story I never knew. But how did we get from St. Nicholas to Santa Claus?
Right. Well, it wasn't a straight shot. See, St. Nicholas's stories and image spread through Europe. They started to blend with figures like the English Father Christmas and, of course, the Dutch Sinterklaas.
Sinterklaas, right, with Zwarte Piet or Black Pete.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of talk about that figure, hasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's a central part of the Dutch celebration, Sinterklaas arriving by steamboat with Zwarte Piet as his helper. But the thing is, Zwarte Piet's traditionally depicted in blackface.
Right.
And, well, that's a tradition facing more and more criticism for being, racist and insensitive.
Yeah, it makes you realize that traditions change. We've got to be aware of how they come across today. But back to the timeline. When did Santa start looking like the red-suited, reindeer-flying figure we're used to?
That evolution really kicked off in America. But early American depictions of Santa, they were pretty different.
Oh, yeah.
Washington Irving, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow guy.
Yeah.
Well, he described Santa as a Dutch sailor in his 1809 book, A History of New York. Not quite the jolly old elf we picture, right?
Not even close.
So when did the sailor suit get swapped for the red suit? Well, it seems like the big change happened in the 1800s with that famous poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas.
'Twas the night before Christmas.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Published in 1823, it really cemented Santa's image as the chubby and plump elf. Reindeer, sleigh, and all, the belly like a bowl full of jelly.
Oh, yeah, that poem definitely paints a picture. Anything else contribute to the Santa we know and love today?
You bet. Later in the 1800s, Thomas Nast, the cartoonist, really refined Santa's look in his illustrations. He might even be the first one to visually link Santa with the North Pole.
Wow, so the Santa Claus story, at least the one everyone knows, it's mostly an American invention.
Well, it's more accurate to say the American Santa is like a mashup of all these different cultures, all seen through an American lens. And then, of course, that version took over the world.
Makes sense. Which brings us to the fact that there are all sorts of different Santas celebrated worldwide, and I'm really curious to hear about those.
Oh, for sure. We definitely need to explore those because Santa's not a one-size-fits-all kind of guy. You've got Ded Moroz in Russia, long blue coat, much more serious vibe. Then there's Joulupukki in Finland, living in a cozy cottage in the woods. Every culture has its own spin on the whole gift-giving thing.
It's amazing how one figure can inspire so many different versions, and even how we picture Santa's workshop has changed, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's gone from one guy making toys to this huge factory with elves running around.
Exactly. And pop culture has really run with that image, especially with all those jokes about elves' working conditions.
Yeah.
But that shift in Santa's workshop, it kind of reflects bigger changes in our world, too.
I like that. Okay, so we've taken a mythical figure and built this whole system around him. It makes you wonder, what other ways has Santa Claus become part of our real world?
Well, consider this. Where does Santa actually live? It seems every other country wants to claim his official residence.
It's true, I've heard it all. Canada, Alaska, Greenland, Finland. It's like a competition to be Santa's landlord.
Haha, exactly. It shows how much we want to believe in the magic of Santa, I guess. But trying to pin down his address, it raises some questions about, like, commercialization and the money-making side of Santa, which is something we'll get into later.
That's a great segue because, well, not everyone's on board the Santa train. There are some pretty strong criticisms out there.
Oh, for sure. Santa's got his fans, but he's also got his critics. And their points are worth considering. So let's start with some of the objections from a religious perspective.
Okay, let's unpack that. What are people saying from a faith-based point of view?
Well, some Christian groups say all the Santa stuff distracts from the real meaning of Christmas. Like it takes the focus off celebrating Jesus' birth and puts it on, well, presents and stuff.
I can see where they're coming from. And it's not just about faith, is it? There's also the argument that Santa, well, he kind of promotes a shopping frenzy.
Right, that whole consumerism thing. Critics say the focus on Santa and all the gifts fuels this more mindset. It pressures families to spend more than they can afford and links happiness with how much stuff you get.
It's a good point, especially in today's world. It makes you think about what we're really teaching kids about what matters during the holidays.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the whole debate about, is it okay to tell kids that Santa is real?
Ah, the big Santa lie. It's a topic that gets everyone talking. What are the arguments on each side?
Well, some folks think lying to kids, even about something like Santa, can damage trust and hurt their critical thinking skills.
Right.
But those who defend the Santa tradition, they often say it's harmless fun, a way to spark kids' imaginations. They believe it adds magic to childhood and creates these positive memories.
Interesting to hear both sides. I do think the idea of Santa maybe pushing materialism is something to consider, especially as we head into the holidays.
I agree. It's a good reminder to focus on what truly matters. Time with loved ones, generosity, and enjoying the simple things.
Okay, let's circle back to Santa's workshop and his supposed home. Where does he actually live?
Ah, the great Santa address debate.
Yeah.
Like we said before, a bunch of countries claim to be Santa's official home. Canada even gave Santa citizenship in 2008.
Really?
Yeah, and they gave him the postal code H0H08080.
That's clever. But why are there so many places claiming to be Santa's HQ?
Well, that's partly about tourism. Having Santa live in your country brings in visitors, especially during the holidays. It's good for the economy.
Right, and it feeds into that sense of wonder around Santa.
Exactly. We want to believe in the magic, and those locations make it feel real.
And it's not just his home, right? We see Santa everywhere before Christmas, malls, parades, even on video calls now.
It's crazy how a fictional character has become so ingrained in our lives. And it all started with the very first Santa's Grotto, set up in a department store in Liverpool back in 1879.
Wow, that's going way back. So that one idea, letting kids meet Santa in person, well, it's become a global thing.
Totally. And it's evolved, especially with technology like video calls.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of traditions, what about all those letters to Santa? I used to write them all the time as a kid.
Me too. It's mind-blowing to think how many kids around the world send letters to Santa every year. It's like a network of Christmas wishes.
I love that. And post offices everywhere have embraced it. They have these whole systems for collecting, sorting, even answering millions of letters to Santa Claus.
It's pretty amazing.
It really is. It's a simple act, writing a letter, but it's become such a big part of the holidays.
It encourages kids to write, teaches them about letters, and makes them feel like their wishes are reaching the North Pole.
And their wishes are being heard in a way, right? Many of those letters get adopted by charities or people who fulfill those Christmas wishes.
That's a great point. It shows that even with all the commercialism, Santa can inspire real generosity.
Okay, so we've talked about Santa's origins, the different versions, the criticisms, his workshop, his home. But how do we actually know where he is on Christmas Eve?
You mean besides the whole magically delivering presents to every well-behaved kid in one night thing?
Well, yeah. But, now we can track his journey with technology, right?
That's right. And get this. It all started by accident. In 1955, a Sears ad printed the wrong phone number for their Santa hotline.
Oops.
Yeah, big oops. But those misdirected calls ended up at the Continental Air Defense Command, CONAD, which later became NORAD.
So what did they do?
Well, instead of ignoring those calls, they rolled with it. They started using radar to track Santa and told his location to anyone who called. It was a spontaneous act of kindness that turned into this huge Christmas tradition.
So that's how NORAD Track Santa began. Wow.
Exactly. Now it's a huge operation with volunteers answering calls and emails from kids all over the world who want to know where Santa is.
It's amazing how a little mistake turned into something so heartwarming.
I know, right? And with technology, there are even more ways to track Santa now. You have the Google Santa Tracker, the Santa Update Project, and tons of websites and apps that say they can pinpoint Santa's location.
It's like mission control for Christmas Eve. But even with all that tech, there's still a sense of wonder about Santa's journey.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? We might see him on a screen, but the real magic of Santa is in our imagination.
So after all this, who is Santa Claus?
Well, I think it shows he's more than just a jolly old elf with presents. He's a symbol of hope, dreams, even our worries about the holidays.
He's a reflection of us, the good and the bad, and he reminds us that even in a world focused on technology and buying stuff, there's still room for a little magic.
I like that. But before we move on, I have one last thought-provoking question for you to consider.
Okay, lay it on me. What's that thought-provoking question?
If Santa Claus, really rebranded for the 21st century, what would that look like? More modern, more ethical, inclusive.
Whoa, that's a big one. A 21st century Santa. Well, first thing I'd ditch is that whole naughty or nice list.
Yeah.
It's kind of judgy, don't you think?
It is a bit, yeah. Like reward and punishment doesn't really fit with that whole unconditional love and giving thing we associate with the holidays.
Right. Instead of good or bad, maybe we focus on acts of kindness, no matter how big or small. Santa could encourage everyone to do something for others, give back to their community.
I like that. Shifting from getting stuff to doing something bigger than yourself,
Yeah.
That's a much more ethical approach. What else would you change?
To make Santa more global, we could borrow from gift-giving traditions worldwide. Not just the American Santa, but bring in Dead Moroz, Julapuki, Santa Claus.
Oh, I see what you mean. A Santa who reflects all those different holiday traditions.
Yeah.
That's a really cool way to celebrate how diverse the world is.
Exactly. And maybe he could even travel in a more eco-friendly way.
Instead of the reindeer and sleigh.
Yeah. Like a solar-powered airship or maybe even a train. It would send a message about sustainability.
Now you're talking. Sustainable Santa for a sustainable future. That's a message that resonates with a lot of people, especially younger generations who are all about the environment.
And while we're at it, let's give Santa a wardrobe makeover.
Oh, yeah.
Ditch the old suit, give him something stylish and sustainable, maybe made from recycled materials, a visual symbol of his eco-commitment.
I love it. A Santa who practices what he preaches.
Right. So our new 21st century Santa, kind, inclusive, eco-conscious, maybe even a bit of a fashion icon.
A Santa who shows the best of humanity and inspires us to be more giving, compassionate, and responsible citizens of the world. That's a vision, all right.
There you have it, folks. From 4th century saint to 21st century icon, we've covered the myth, the magic, and the real meaning behind Santa Claus.
And we even redesigned him for the future.
But now we want to hear from you, the listeners. Is it time for Santa to get a makeover? What would your ideal 21st century Santa look like?
It's definitely something to think about, maybe even discuss with your family or friends this holiday season.
Totally. And hey, if you stumble across any other topics that need a good deep dive, you know where to find us. Until then, keep those brain cells working, and happy holidays.